Just move this. Okay, thank you. And today's presenters are, you'll see us in here with our cameras on as well, is Paul and Jacob and myself. We're all from Agile Lean House, which is a company based in Denmark and Norway with branches in other countries as well. And we focus on anything in the Agile space that we can help with, that we can we support organizations and companies with. We do education in Scrum and Agile Lean leadership, and we do coaching, assistance, and tool making, mainly software tools. And this is the agenda for today's webinar. Paul is going to check in with us in a little bit, and he's going to set the stage for this topic and talk about feedback and value in general, and how we define it for the purposes of explained later in this webinar. And then Jacob is going to take over, and he's going to talk about different types of feedback, what kind of feedback is valuable and how to use it. And he's going to present or talk about two different ways you can work with your companies or with your customers, is what I wanted to say, in order to benefit and from the feedback in the best way, and how to how to provide good customer service. And he's going to show also some new functionality that has just been created. We're going to work with a case and demonstrate it in our biggest software tool, which is called Agamba. It is a workflow tool.
Hello.
Oh, hello.
Yes.
I just
Yeah.
hope everyone is here. So we're not going to go through all of Agamba. This is just to give you a little indication of what the tool is, but we're going to talk about a feedback feature or functionality, if you will, that has just been added to it and how to use it. Yes, so I will pass the word to Paul.
Right. Can I share my screen? I can do that.
Yes, you can.
And I think this is what I want to do. Okay, can everybody see that? All right. Well, first of all, good evening, everybody, or wherever you are. Hello, and thank you for giving up your time this evening to sit with us. I want to start with a sort of a gentle, in a kind of a gentle way, and just talk a little bit about the word feedback. I did a little bit of research, and the first reference I could find to the word feedback was back in the 1920s. And as we probably all know, it referred to the sort of unwelcome noise that you get out of an amplifier on some occasions. And then, of course, over time, the word has been adapted and used in different ways. And by the 1960s, it was being used more in the kind of way that we use it today, as a sort of a non-technical word, meaning some kind of welcome or actually unwelcome critique of things. And while we were preparing for this, I started thinking about feedback and thinking that, you know, today a lot of what goes on out there by way of market research and gathering of information is done by big data. And I just wondered whether, you know, is big data now the new definition of feedback, and where does it fit in? So by way of checking in here, I'm just curious what other people think about this word, and if anybody's got any ideas, by all means raise your hand and shout out, or put something in the chat. But that's, I just wanted people to start thinking about that word and what it actually means. So let's go on here. So we're not here really to knock the idea of big data. I think there's a kind of a role for that out there, but But my interpretation of big data is that more often it's there to benefit the suppliers more than anybody else. They track our behavior, they send us ads for things that we've already bought, and it's more of an irritation to customers and consumers than it is of value to them. And to me, feedback is much more powerful when it's used to initiate what we call the feedback feed-forward loop, which is a way of putting the input that you get into play into the entire value chain there. And we think that by doing that, that is a way that it benefits the stakeholders, all kinds of stakeholders, but it specifically can be a benefit to the customer. Now, of course, when you're asking for feedback, it's no good asking for feedback if you're not going to do anything about it. So there's a kind of a psychological or mindset aspect to this too. It requires some humility, because if somebody tells you something, then there may be a requirement there for you to change something or adjust something. And of course, the other aspect of this is that not all feedback is equal. And we have to do some kind of analysis and sort through things to find out what's useful, what's not useful. And some feedback can be very unpleasant. And who wants to be the engineer that gets the call that says, I was on a plane and my laptop caught fire? I mean, that's feedback. Is kind of dramatic sort of stuff, but it is important in certain contexts. So I just want to tell you a little bit of a story here. Some of you may be familiar with this, but it's called the bullet hole study. And during World War II, the United States Army, this was before they had actually invented the Air Force there, they wanted to do a study of the effect of planes being shot at. And they involved a bunch of mathematicians, and they got them to studying where the bullet holes there were hitting, where they were hitting the planes. And their initial thought was, well, we've got to see where the bullets go, and then we're going to put armor there to protect the planes. But then somebody said, well, you might be missing the point here a little bit, because the only planes that you see with bullet holes in them are the ones that come back. The ones that you don't see have been shot down and the crew have been killed. So maybe we should be looking at this in a different way, and we should be looking at maybe putting armor where the bullets do not destroy, make holes in the side of the plane, to look at it in a different way. So my only point in this is telling you this story is that sometimes you have to look at feedback from a different angle, and sometimes you have to consider where the real value might be there. Because in this particular case, the real value would have been protecting the planes in such a way that they didn't get shot down and the crews killed. So this is where value comes into play in the story here. So just a few sort of general things here. I want to say that feedback and feed forward, which I'll talk about a little bit in a minute, doesn't occur in a vacuum. It requires all kinds of input and all kinds of different perspectives on that input. So, it can be, as we probably see quite frequently, it can be critiques of existing products or technology. It can be new ideas. The customer might come and say, we really love this thing here, but wouldn't it be great if it did this? I mean, you get input from users. Big companies have user groups, you get input from them too. But there are also other external things that affect things that maybe customers don't come up with. Customers may not be aware of new technologies that are coming along. So sometimes it's incumbent on us as the suppliers to be the one to put ideas out there and say, what do you think about this? Of course, our competitors have some bearing on this too, because our competitor may have got to an idea before us, and we've got a little bit of catching up to do. So this is all important information in terms of our development is concerned. And of course, there are things that change, social things that change. Nobody sits in bed now on the telephone on a landline. Everybody's wandering around the streets talking on their cell phones. Changes the way we interact with the technology. And there's also economic impacts on things too. Things that were once absurdly expensive suddenly become cheap enough for us to buy. There are countless of other things. But I just wanted to make the point that feedback comes in lots of different forms, and it's not just somebody saying, I like this product, or I don't like this product, or wouldn't it be better if it did this or that? So I just wanted to step back a moment and think about this kind of intersection of feedback and value creation, and how it can actually happen. So as some of you will be aware, this is an illustration, an example, if you like, of an agile lean leadership framework. So this is our framework that we use in agile organizations. And the way it works is simply that we have a series of what we call circles or teams. We've got customer circles out on the right-hand side there. We've got primary circles, which are teams of individuals in all different kinds of disciplines that are serving those customers. Then we've got circles that exist behind them. These are people who are providing services to the primary circles. We've got suppliers at the back end of this, and then we've got other kinds of circles for resolution of issues or escalation of issues, all that kind of stuff. And in an agile lean leadership organization, the grayed out area here is the value stream, and then the dotted oval that I put on there is what we consider to be the feed forward loop, and it is in fact a loop, because what we intend is for information to flow through this. So we get information starts, the little stars there, I don't know why I put them on there, but they're just to indicate that this information is coming at us from all over the place. But somebody gets some information, it goes into the loop, it gets analyzed, it gets shared, it gets spread around, and then it comes back around the circle again. Now, of course, this only works when you have got open channels of communication, and one of the features of an agile lean leadership framework is that we require radical transparency. So that means that all the people in this in the value stream here, all the people in the circles are empowered, they're engaged, and they're allowed to communicate with each other openly and freely. Doesn't mean to say that you have to share all your secrets with your customers. It just means that where there is relevant information or input that's flowing through the system here, that people should be allowed to share that and engage with that openly and freely. So again, just want to think again about what's the output? What are the outputs from this? So where are the values here? So so again, you can define this in lots of different ways. But if you've got a product and it does what the customer needs, that's a source of value. If it's quality that fits the purpose, that's a source of value. If it's reliable, I spent a lot of my career working in the newspaper industry. And in the newspaper industry, you don't really care that much about quality, but what you care an awful lot about is on-time delivery. Because to produce a newspaper, you need ink, you need paper, you need printing plates, you need manpower, you need delivery trucks, you need string, you need everything. And if any one of those things is missing, then the whole enterprise falls apart. If you don't have enough paper to print your newspaper, you're talking about possibly hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost revenues there. So people perceive values in different ways, and one of our jobs is to understand where those values come from. And I won't go down through the list here, but other sources of value can come from the impact that they have on our organizations. So we worked a lot with software companies. We are a software company. We're always familiar with this idea that at the end of a project, it's 80% done, and the hardest part's the 20% that's left there, but we've got 2 weeks to deliver. So nobody goes home until it's done. And you have these kind of awful death marches there. So another aspect of creating value is creating value for your own organization there, creating values that you organize your work in such a way that these death marches, these awful sprints to the finish there are eliminated or minimized. So, we're talking about coming at value from lots of different angles there, from the customer point of view primarily, but also from our own point of view too. Right. So how does feedback impact value? Again, we've talked about this a little bit, but it's about getting good information. It's about clearly understanding your customers' requirements, and it's about building teams to meet those requirements. In more detail, it's about if you're working on projects where you've got deliveries and things, it's about creating good estimations of those projects. Bearing in mind what I just said a moment about the death marches, one of the things we're trying to do here is we're trying to look at the work that we've got, understand clearly what we have to do, and then analyze it. You know, how much time is this going to take? How complex is this? Once I've done this, how much value does this actually create? And if we're going to set up a system where we're going to do our work in iterations, how do we maintain value so that we keep the forward momentum there? How do we eliminate doing things that that the customer doesn't want us to do there? So value again comes from lots of different sources and does require a little bit of work to sort it out in your mind so that you work in the most effective way. So I talked a little bit there about aligning with customer needs. One of the purposes of this is, okay, we're trying to understand customer requirements here. How do we organize our own organization so that we can meet their customers' needs more accurately? And the bottom line here is probably the most important one there, is that we try to endeavor to learn, to adapt, to learn more, to adapt more, and carry on this cycle of absorbing information, analyzing it, reacting to it. So I'm not going to drone on too much longer, because I think the most interesting part of the presentation today is still to come. But just a couple of things just to round this off. So feedback is not just one thing. It's not just about product critiquing. It involves everybody in the value chain, from the customers through the suppliers, and it involves the bigger socio-economic picture as well. For it to be useful, it should be a continuous and transparent loop of ideas. And the aim of doing this is to understand what creates true value. And an old boss of mine once said, if it's good for the customer, it's probably good for us too. And I think that's a good rule of thumb there. If you're already working in an agile way, one of the benefits of doing this is that it allows you to create backlogs which focus on what matters, and to balance the iterations so that you can maintain the velocity of your work. Not easy to do that, of course, and there are always trade-offs. We understand that, but that's the aim. So I'll finish you with this one slide here, and I think that these are some simple attributes to think about. So when you look at feedback, it's as much a mindset as it is of anything else. It means that you should want to look for feedback, but more than that, you should be able to accept it and realize that this is actually in your benefit. It may be that one of your best ideas has been blown up there, but nevertheless, you should be able to accept feedback and act upon it. And second point is that it works best when you have an organization that operates transparently and is able to communicate openly throughout the entire value chain there. And as you'll see in a moment, the final thing here is that it's also very handy if you've got good tools for doing that. And with that, I hope I didn't overrun my time, and I will give this over to you folks to take over. There you go.
I will share my screen then. So my name is Jakob, and I will, together with Anna, take the remainder of this presentation in this webinar and follow up on some of the things that Paul said. So to start with this further talk about feedback, I want to just set the stage and talk about the negative part, to give you some cases of bad feedback, to separate ourselves from what we don't want to do. So these are some examples of the kind of feedback you don't want to collect and don't want to work towards. So first of all, if you are collecting feedback without proper context, one example of this is that a project that I worked on where the UX girl desperately wanted some feedback, so she used a tool which could track eye movement and thereby track where is the user looking for to click and find out, have you placed the buttons correctly in this application? It's actually a very good idea. It's not that bad. It could have been a good feedback, except that the 4 people she chose didn't know what the tool was for. They didn't know anything about the building projects which this tool was for, so they didn't have any context. And of course, they were just desperately looking at something to click on because they didn't know what they were doing there. And hence the feedback was useless. Another bad example of feedback if you are too quick to dismiss feedback. And I would actually say that's if you have that sort of arrogance to yourself that, well, user just doesn't understand, he doesn't know what's good for him, you've missed the whole point of feedback as being something that should trigger humility. Being a feedback-oriented person should come with a certain degree of humility, as Paul also said. Then you can say, if you want feedback for everything, no matter if it makes sense, that's also a case of bad feedback. My favorite example of that is that, and I don't do that much anymore, but there was a period when I was shopping online. Every time I ordered a package, the Danish PostNord, the shipping company, they would send me a query wanting them to rate and review how much did you like our shipping. I don't care. It got here, and you'll hear from me if it didn't get here. So if you don't hear from me, it probably was okay. And just stop bothering me, stop asking me. It doesn't make sense. You need to know your place. Don't ask for feedback if there is nothing to tell, if no news are good news. Then you can also talk about feedback not being sufficiently representative. I guess that's the problem when you just act on the loudest person in the room or the one screaming with the most pitched voice. You actually end up going with probably not the best feedback or the feedback representing the whole suite of users or customers, but the people who are loudest. And then finally, you can talk about just being overwhelmed by the sheer volume of disordered feedback. And that's actually getting back to what Paul was talking about. If you don't have anything to sort of order your feedback or handle your feedback, it might be very good. You might answer people politely, but you won't be able to act upon it because you're just overwhelmed. You can also talk about different types of feedback and different types of feedback gathering. And the reason why I want to go through this is to sort of say what we are not going into details with, because that's not because it's bad feedback. It's just not the focus of this webinar right now. First of all, you should probably decide on whether you want, or both of them, of course, but distinguish between human responses and measured feedback. So whenever we are measuring eye movement or measuring behavior, all that sort of thing that you would normally associate with big data, as Paul was starting to talk about, we could probably talk about measured feedback. You have some sort of probe, you have some sort of system measuring the responses, measuring this and that. And that's different. That's fundamentally different from if you're asking a human being and getting their actual wording, what they think about. Those are two different types of feedback, and there's a room and a place for both of them. A bit the same thing you could say about qualitative or quantitative feedback. There are definitely places where you want to collect feedback and make statistics out of it. In particular, if you don't want just the loudest person to dominate. But again, make up your mind whether it's qualitative or quantitative feedback that you're looking for. And then again, there are a lot of methods we could go into for how do you ask the right questions in order to get feedback, methods for facilitating workshops and so forth. And there is a whole discipline of setting up polls, surveys, or questionnaires. All of those things are completely valid, but it's not going to be the focus for the remainder of this webinar. What we are going to focus on is the kind of feedback which is dialogue driven or dialogue oriented, where I am having a dialogue in order to understand the response of another human being, be that a customer or user or client or whatever that situation is. And I'm going to talk about two different types of handling the customer, either as being partially involved or being fully integrated, and that's what we're going to go into. So these are the two scenarios that we are going to dive into in this webinar. Both of them, for both of them, we will be demonstrating them using a Gemba. That's not because a Gemba is the only thing where you can do this sort of thing, but it's more to illustrate the principles and at the same time showcase what we believe you can do in a Gemba, not only with handling feedback, but also with not only with answering people, but also with connecting with existing workflows. So what we are looking at here is a screen dump from a Gemba, and it looks fairly similar to what Paul was showing before with the Agile Lean Leadership value stream, where you focus on customers and you have different departments or circles in your organization to handle customers. The specifics of these, Anna will go into that with the use case that we've chosen here. And just to set the stage, a Gemba is a versatile tool for managing projects and organization structures and teams. It's for helping you to describe and plan your work, in particular user stories, and doing that in a way that provides transparency, an overview of dependencies and deadlines and other relations. And a lot more could be said about a Gemba, which we won't do in this webinar because we want to focus on the feedback gathering part of that. But it is important for me to note that there is a whole lot more in a Gemba, of course, because that's where it comes into play when you want to connect your feedback with your existing workflows. So in these examples, we're sort of assuming that even though we were focusing on the feedback handling, we're also talking about how you can connect it to your existing workflows, which could be in a Gemba. So the first situation, before I let Anna explain our small fake company here, is the partially involved customer. Basically, this borrows a lot from the fundamental principles of what you might know from issue tracking systems or support handling systems, ticket-driven systems. It's basically about giving customers an opportunity to submit their feedback either by themselves, typing in the feedback, getting back to you, or by you registering the feedback from customers. You might have been talking to them on the phone, and you want to have a dialogue with the customer or the client to understand where they're coming at this. So, and since our focus here is on creating value for the customer, one might ask, well, where is the value in this? Well, the value is first and foremost, I would say, to give customers good service and clear response. To give them a sense that they are being heard. That's an important part of that's important value in that kind of feedback handling. but then it's also to turn that feedback into actual improvements or problems that need to be fixed. And it's in doing so to avoid what I would call distorting the actual feedback in the loop. An example of that, I used to work in a company where our sales manager would require, every time we had a sprint planning, he would say, I just want that endpoint in the application. I want it to work like that. We're like, why that? That's not according to the official specification. Just stop asking those questions. Just do it. And at the end of the day, after months, we found out that that's because he'd been talking to a customer who needed this or that feature. We already had that. He didn't know that, and he was requesting the wrong thing. And had we just known the original conversation with the customer, we could have advised him and corrected him. So we want to collect feedback, but we also want it not to be distorted. When we are talking about this, I want you to have this flowchart in mind. So what we are talking about is, if we start at the end here, we have a product or a service. And based on that product or service, we get feedback, which can be talked about as reaction from the customer going back to us and in again. And this is the way we handle that feedback. We have a look at it. We might have a dialogue for clarification, customer service with the customer going back and forth. We might categorize it. So we want to know what is it really about. And some of those in this loop, we might figure out that it's just a question. It's more or less just a support situation here, and it gets resolved in that loop. But it might also turn out that the feedback has some more to it. It might be a problem or a good idea. And based on all that feedback, we need to prioritize and filter it, and we need to connect it with our existing workflows in order for it to improve our product and services. And that is the continuous loop that we want to find ourselves in with this kind of feedback. So I'm gonna hand it over to you, Anna, to start explaining our small use case here.
Yes. And while I explain the, oh, can you see the correct screen? Good. In the chat, in a minute, you will get a link where, if you want to, you can try out this first feedback feature that we've been hinting at, and I'll show you also how. And it is just sort of for fun. The feedback goes to us, and all you need is an email, and we don't use it for anything else. It's just for you if you want to try it out. But this company that we are going to build the last bit of the demonstration on is called Weekend in a Box. So it is sort of, if you're familiar with subscription services with meals, like meal boxes that come to your house daily or weekly, depending on what kind of box it is. So this one is a subscription service for weekend coziness, or hygge. It's sort of a Danish construct that just means curling up on the couch with snacks and a blanket or something like that. So anything connected to that concept, you'll receive in a box and be surprised. A mix of edible things and I won't say junk, but just sort of like different things that are connected to coziness. So there's slippers and blankets and things here. And so this is our product. This is our core product in this company. And we send them out weekly. They arrive at the customers on Fridays, and it's called Weekend in a Box. For the second type of feedback that Jakob is going to show a little bit later, we will also work from the last bullet here, where it says we are starting developing a generic label also for our boxes, so that companies and organizations can use it without our label on, but for their own companies. So that's the case. And I will, Jacob, have you put in the chat yet a link for, yes, perfect. Well, then I will show you how to, just a second. So if you go to that link, you have to sign in with an email, and then you will get to this kind of page. Your page would be empty because you haven't given feedback yet. But in this case here, I'm Elise, who has signed in and has been receiving these boxes for a while, and also really like this feedback functionality. So she's included or she's written to the company several times. See, if I click here, you'll see some of the closed tickets or conversations that have been going on, where she's been sending in ideas for improvements or complaints or in general things she wants to have, like suggestions, things she wants to have differently. And so what you do, if you just go to when you just see it, you just see the top part of it. If you haven't given any yet, and there's a pop-up here where you can write feedback, and you can add pictures if you want. And here you see an example. And if you want, there are categories that the company chooses for themselves. Here, I can choose between, do I want to say something about the content, or does my comment have something to do with shipping, or maybe the website or subscription. But this is, I want to say something about content. So I will submit that. And I can see that it's submitted. I'll just remove some of the closed ones because they're not so interesting for me anymore. This one says it's waiting for me. So someone wrote to me since I was here last. And here you can see Jakob has been writing to me, and I can write back to him. And I can also see whether or not it is in progress. If I use see here, it's a little bit longer, but here I wrote in an idea that has been taken seriously and is now affecting the development of the product. And that's why it's in progress. And I think I will, unless I forgot to, well, I can show you, you can choose just the ones waiting for my reply. Or if I have a lot, I can also free text search. And then Jacob will show you what it looks like on the inside from the company side perspective. So I'll pass it on again.
Yep. So the screen that I'm sharing is from within this circle. That is, if you think in terms of agile in leadership, this is the place where we handle all the consumer sales, and I'm in a team, the customer support team or the consumer support team, and in this team we receive all incoming feedback. It's automatically assigned to us, and that is we could configure it to be a team or another person. So I see all the income here. I'll just filter away all the closed ones, and I could filter to see only the unread ones and only the ones that are assigned to me or my team. So as I mentioned earlier, my job here would be to shift through these and answer the customers, make sure that they get a reply, and maybe go into a longer discussion with some of the customers to see what is this about. And some of you have already played around and added some stuff here. So thank you for that. Just to give you a few examples of how this can be used, besides just answering the customers. And you already saw me answering some of Anna's questions before. So this is the one that Anna was talking about, and this is how it looks to me. And you can see here that part of it is the same as Anna saw, but I can furthermore I can categorize it even more, and I have more details here on the inside. I could also deem it that this is actually something we need a solution for. So I want actually to create as an idea that we include different kinds of chocolate. And I could then pass this on to our procurement team, and thereby I can connect the discussion that I'm having with the customer Anne or Elise to a solution which can then be passed into and be planned by the team working on this, and thereby connect some of these feedback threads to actual customers. Some of these discussions might take a different road. Like this discussion I had with a guy named James who started out being disgruntled about having received slippers and candles, and it actually ended up that he wanted some more masculine options instead of those feminine things. And he himself came up with a couple of examples for that. And besides having this discussion with him, it actually ended up in 2 stories for adding the specific things that he suggested, which have then been passed on to the procurement team, and a larger epic about actually adding these options to our service so that you can get different boxes. So it's just an example of connecting a feedback thread with something that we pass into our workflow. We can put it in a sprint, we can work on a Kanban, at the same time having the link back. So for instance, if I go to this one, I can see the description here, but I can always go back and see the specific discussion that we had with this customer, or the multiple feedback threads which might have been connected to that. Another example of that is this here, that we apparently had a problem in our procedures where there were no packaging airbags. And that was experienced by multiple customers. At least 2 of them have reported this. So there are 2 different feedback inquiries which have been connected to this problem. Another example is, see if I can find it here. This guy here was disgruntled about not having received his personal discount, and mentioned that Anne was the one he talked to. And I actually had an internal conversation here with Anne, which was not visible to him. And she took over and gave the guy a reply. So we can answer the customer, give him the information he needs, but at the same time not have him fully integrated, but simply partially involved, and connect these feedback threads with our existing workflow. And then, of course, you can always have the statistics about how well are we performing here? Are we answering? Is the queue just growing and growing, or are we answering it within a satisfactory time period, and so forth, and so forth. So, jumping out of this, to this one. So we have looked at the partially involved customer scenario, answering customers, trying to see if they have ideas or problems that should be connected with our existing workflow. And as you might figured that's okay if it's a matter of fairly small dialogues or conversations with customers, maybe one or more of them, but it's not good enough if you really want to work together with your customer on a larger scale. And that's what we have called the fully integrated customer. Again, it's still dialogue oriented, but there can be situations where you actually want to invite your customer to collaborate, where you want to share the same transparency, as Paul also mentioned in the beginning. But at the same time, of course, not necessarily invite him into your entire organization, but into a part from where you can then delegate work if necessary. And this creates value because the customer gets to be involved. He gets to see for himself. You are obviously showing him the same details as you're working on. And by collaborating in this style or this way, you minimize the risk of getting it wrong. And the example that we've chosen for this is, think if you want to expand your services to deliver these boxes to nursing homes. That has so far not been what we have been working on in this fake company. But now we've met up with this guy called Lars, and I've invited him in to be a user in this circle. And we are working together on describing how could we make this company to company delivery service with the specific aim of providing boxes for nursing homes. And that since this is the first time that we do this in this company, it gives whole suite of questions. How do we white label or generic label these boxes? Because that has been sort of, Lars wants his own label on these boxes. How do we manage company subscriptions? And what is characteristic for this specific customer segment? So we are working together on this. Part of that could be the roadmap. So these are some selected stories that we have put in the roadmap, connected them with the most important milestones here. Both Lars, who is assigned to this specific story, and I can access this and work on that, and thereby share the same timeline. It's also the story map, which I was showing you just before, where we are working together on describing the different larger epics, but also smaller stories about what do we need to go into this new market segment, both in terms of the specific use cases for nursing homes, but also just how we're gonna white label it. Some of these stories I have created, and some of these stories Lars has created, and we can both of us can track the whole activity here in the dashboard. I won't go into details with why should you work in a hierarchical tree structure like this in the story map. I think that's a discussion for another time, but let it just be said that we believe that there are some really good advantages in working in a project like this. And Lars and I have been discussing some of these. I had a suggestion about including bottles of whiskey in the bottles and let the elderly people enjoy themselves, which Lars thought was a terrible idea based on his knowledge of that market segment. And okay, I'm not an expert on that. I just thought it would be a good idea. And we can go forth back and forth on this. Some of the stories in this circle can be just solved directly here. For instance, we have a small Kanban board where Lars is working on putting together a custom demo box for a nursing home in Aarhus. But some of them are actually not something that we should work on. We're just in the business of describing it. And therefore this, if we just return and have a look at the circle map, as I showed you before, this is where we are. and we actually have relations to the procurement team and the subscription services team who are also working with IT. And some of the stories that we are working on are therefore delegated to the people over in these other circles. If I have a new story about it should be possible to change the number of boxes per subscription, that's something our IT people should look at, and I will therefore delegate it to these in the subscription services. So this is an example of how can you invite your customer in to be fully integrated, to work together on describing this, but at the same time, not necessarily giving him access to the rest of your company by having this not so tight coupling to the other circles where you can delegate work if necessary. Yeah, I will jump back to our presentation then, or I think I will hand it over to Anna from here, because this more or less concludes our two different scenarios that we wanted to demonstrate with feedback, namely the limitedly involved customer scenario and the fully integrated customer scenario.
Yes, and I will share my screen. So to sort of wrap up, connecting it to the title of this webinar, it is about how to turn feedback into real customer value, both defined as the customer experiencing having easily accessible way to provide feedback, to ask questions or come up with ideas or tell about problems, or and also to see that actually has a real effect on the product, that it is taken seriously and it is appreciated by the company. And also, like Jakob talked about, that the feedback goes into the company and through the value chain for where it needs to be without distortion, that people can see the context that it is in. And I think, Paul, you had a third point. I want to make sure if you want to include that here before I go on.
No, I think you've covered everything, Anne. So I think for the time being.
Okay, good. So that sort of concludes where we will have time for questions and comments at the end. I just always get 2 minutes to say who we are again. So we're from Agile House. And like I said before, we provide training, education. This is an image that sort of depicts our course catalog. Each circle is a 1-day course, and then you can combine them according to the arrows. So in the middle, we have our Agile leadership track, where the first day is also the first day of a Scrum Master or Product Owner course. You can see more on our website if you're interested. We make tools. You've seen parts of a Gemba today. We also have an app called Cool Estimation, and we sell Agile cards, which are estimation poker, that also have where you can do Kano estimation for discussing value, and complexity estimation, where we use the Kinevin framework, if some of you are familiar with that. And Cool Estimation, the app, is really an online version of that. And we have free trials of both our software tools. You can get a 1-month free trial for Cool Estimation and a 3-month free trial for Gemba. And this is our Prime Agile Lean Leadership Prime network. We also have a standard network, which is for everyone who's gone through our courses, and also other people who they want to sign up, that provides a library and access to some free courses. Our Prime network is both for individuals and organizations who want to benefit from knowledge and resources within Agile House, and also access to the tools at a discount. And our next webinar is in 2 weeks. It's not been announced on Meetup yet, but it will be within the next couple of days. And I think, Kurt, you wanted to comment on what we mean by a kaleidoscope of product owner repertoires, if I remember correctly.
Well, very briefly, because it has to be time for questions as well, but we're trying to look at the various possibilities a product owner has to clarify what we're actually building, to combine what the customer is saying, the feedback, to make sure that we operate with what often is called a common mental model, so that the customers and those who build it actually see the same mental model, and therefore like make less mistakes and wasteful work. And we're trying to cover some of those tools that you can put into play just to reach that scenario, that situation. Yeah.
Yes. And I think, Paul, I'll just go to the next slide, and then you have that one.
Yes, well, as we always say, if you have been, thanks for listening. And if anybody has any questions or feedback for us now, we would be delighted, or maybe not delighted, but we will be willing to accept it. And thank you.